got some more glimpses of the Harry Potter TV show, specifically what Diagon Alley is starting to look like. Now, Diagon Alley is huge because it's pretty much the first all-magical place Harry sets foot in. Like, he's with the Dursleys, living his normal life, he finds out he's a wizard, and then Diagon Alley is the first place he goes to be submerged in the wizarding world. And, you know, you can only make one first impression, so our first impression into the magical world kind of important, so they have to get this right. This is going to set the tone for if things are going to be bright and colourful and whimsical, or if they're going to be a bit more dark and gothic. Are things going to be prim and proper, or higgledy-piggledy and angular? You know, are we going to have runes on everything to symbolize how magical they all are? There's so much pressure on getting Diagon Alley right, so let's dive in and see how it looks. So this is a fairly low quality picture of the street as a whole, right? So the first thing that I notice is it doesn't look too dissimilar to the Diagon Alley we got in the movies. There are some things, but mostly it looks very quaint and old and English. The shops tower up on both sides. The street itself feels fairly long and narrow. We have buildings that are very colourful with big windows and shop signs. The shops themselves aren't just in straight lines, they overhang and they're angular and they stick out and they're pointy. One big thing that sticks out for me is the cobblestones on the floor. Like, these are like bricks laid side by side all the way down the road, as opposed to what we got in the movie. Just like these more sort of randomly placed stones, which looks cool, but having spent my entire life living in the UK, this kind of cobbled street is far more common. I live near a place called the Barbican in Plymouth, and they have a road exactly like this, so it just feels slightly more authentic. We can see some scissors here, which I would guess would be either like a magical barber shop or maybe Madame Malkin's. So this looks like it says ES on the edge. Don't think Malkin ends in an E. The shop next to it strikes me as what could be Ollivander's. Like, the windows are rounded and dark, just like kind of what we have in the movie. And I think that might be an O that you can just see in the window, but it could be anything. Now at the very top, I would be expecting to see Gringotts, but I guess this could be shot from the other direction. Or maybe they're just not having Gringotts right at the end like they had in the movie Diagon Alley. Moving to some close-ups of some shops then, we've got quality Quidditch supplies here. Now interestingly, this does not look higgledy-piggledy or angular, or like the top of the building is encroaching on Diagon Alley like we saw when we saw the whole street. Like, these buildings have got loads going on. You can see balconies above that darker shop on the left. On the right, you see the buildings actually creeping in over the street, whereas this looks a lot more sort of regular. This could just be a normal street. You do see that with high streets, right? When you're shopping, you have sort of the main high street, and then you have sort of back streets and side streets coming off of it. So, you know, quality Quidditch supplies might be off to the side somewhere. It might just be a different part of Diagon Alley. Maybe they're not making it all just one single street. Obviously, all you can see inside at the moment is construction, and I don't know if they're going to do interiors for all of the shops, or it's just going to be, you know, like a shop face set, blue screen behind to add the interior later. When they go in, presumably they're going to go to a different set. Not all of these shops are going to have workable interiors that they can just walk into. Probably. That's an assumption, but I'd be surprised if every single shop had an interior that was also usable as a set. Because obviously when you get to an interior, you still need lighting. You need all your rigs for your cameras and stuff, space for the crew. I just feel like actually having interiors doesn't make any sense. So these are probably just going to be shop front. So I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't actually fill this out. Although with that said, if any of them did need at least window displays, it's this one, right? This is the one where he first sees the Nimbus 2000, and the following year, the Nimbus 2001. He spends a lot of time in Diagon Alley before his third year, and he spends a lot of time just staring at the firebolt through this window. So I guess even if they're not going to build an entire interior, they maybe need to at least dress the windows. We also have a shot of a few more shops here. So we have Pimpernel's, which does end with an E''S, and it's next to this dark shop here. So could that be Pimpernel's that we're just seeing on the left-hand side creeping in here? Next to what I thought was Ollivander's. Like, we've got some scissors above it and some greenery sticking out of the top, and we don't have that here. So maybe it's not, but also maybe some of these pictures were taken at different times and the sets just aren't finished in some of them. One thing I actually love about this is that you can see the different layers to Diagon Alley. You can see this sort of staircase pushing in from the left-hand side, and then you've got like a balcony where you can enter Glissando's, which looks to be like a magical music shop, which if they give us a scene of like Hagrid going in there and buying a flute, or like Quirrell buying a harp, as sort of foreshadowing for how they're going to put Fluffy to sleep later, that would be quite a cool little detail. I don't think Glissando's is in the books, is it? I don't remember it being mentioned. Or Pimpernel's, which looks like it's got like perfumes? You can see these little vials in the window, and then the decoration around the title kind of look like florals. So I wonder if it's maybe like an apothecary sort of thing, or like a perfume shop. We also have this, we can't see the full name, but it says Tonia Abraxas. Let's say Antonia? Antonia? That looks like an N beforehand. Antonia Abraxas. Abraxas, I think, is Draco's grandfather's name, right? Now, there's always been the question around Harry Potter, like, how did the Malfoys get so rich? Obviously, they're a long-standing wizarding family, so there's like generational wealth there, like we have with the Potters. But I imagine Abraxas is a reason reasonably, or at least was in the olden days, like a common name among wizards. So I wouldn't say I see this and just think that's going to be a Malfoy heritage shop. So I do think the actor who's playing Lucius has said he's already done some filming for the show. And I know they're filming season 1 and 2 back to back, so he could have just got in early with some season 2 scenes. But even though we meet Draco and I think his mother in Madame Malkin's in the first book, Lucius isn't actually there. So either they've inserted him for the show just to give us an intro to Lucius as a character. Maybe if there is a Malfoy heritage shop, maybe that's where Lucius sort of has a little appearance. I wonder if they're going to play up Harry's fame a little bit, and maybe as he first walks through Diagon Alley, we get a bit more of people turning to look at him, seeing his scar, piecing together that that's Harry Potter. People on the street are turning to look at him, maybe people through shop windows glance out and catch a glimpse of him, and maybe it would be Lucius in there, but they don't explain that it's Lucius. Harry Potter's actually really good at that. It mentions characters seemingly in passing like they're not going to be important, and then later they become very important. Like when Hagrid rocks up to Privet Drive with the flying motorbike, he just mentions that he got it from Sirius Black. We had no idea at that point that Sirius Black was going to become such an important character from book 3 onwards. That happens quite a lot through the series, so having characters who will later become important, just having little cameos in these first few scenes, I think that could be quite cool. One thing I really love is that this is like a multi-layered Diagon Alley. Like you can see it with a staircase and the balcony, getting different shops in different places. I think it just adds to the sort of the chaos, the vibe that, you know how the Burrow has just sort of magically been made bigger and bigger as they needed more space? I feel like that's kind of how Diagon Alley would have expanded. And not only would it expand sort of outwards, but with magic, things seem to also expand upwards. I think that's quite cool. Let's compare it to some of the other Diagon Alleys that we've seen through the different iterations of Harry Potter then. Comparing it to the Harry Potter from the movies, it feels fairly similar, though more like a high street than a market, I'd say. Like this movie version has a lot more creeping out of the shops onto the street. And don't get me wrong, this set isn't finished. They might still have to dress it. We could get a lot of that for the show. But currently it looks a bit more like a typical shopping high street, right? Everything they're selling is kept to the confines of their shop. There feels like there's a lot more hustle and bustle going on here. I will say, I don't know if it's because like this is a much older camera, much older picture, but the movie Diagon Alley from the first film feels darker, less vivid, less colourful, a lot more aged as well. Like if you look at the sign for the magical menagerie here, the text is fading and the colour is cracking and stripping in places. Looking further down the high street, there's not any bright popping colours, which when you really think about it, the Scourgify spell exists. You can use magic to clean something in a heartbeat. So the fact that these shop owners don't keep their storefronts perfectly prim, well kept and bright to catch the eye and enticing customers really feels counterintuitive considering they could do it fairly effortlessly, right? Whereas the new version, and don't get me wrong, they could still distress this a little bit, absolutely not a finished set. If I had magic and I owned a shop, I would keep it bright and colourful and eye-catching and clean and inviting. And I would say all of those adjectives that I've just thrown at you seem to summarise the new version of Diagon Alley a little bit more. I'd say the Diagon Alley that we get in the theme parks is largely modelled off the one we get in the movies. So again, not super vivid in colour. There's enough colour from like the signs, the like window fixtures being painted and stuff. But largely it's like natural colours, right? The greys and the browns and the beiges of the stones. Most notably, we do get the giant towering structure of Gringotts at the end of Diagon Alley with the shops wide enough apart that you can see it down the street. And obviously we don't know what direction of Diagon Alley we're shooting down. We don't know if Diagon Alley is going to branch off into side streets like we talked about before. If Gringotts were to be at the end of the street there, I'm not sure you'd really see it. Obviously it could be behind the camera, so we don't need to read too much into that. But we're used to seeing Diagon Alley with Gringotts as the focal point, right? Now, interestingly, if you look at the set from the studio tour, they've gone to this sort of more traditional cobbled street that I was talking about. Like in the Philosopher's Stone, that is not the street that we have. Same with the Chamber of Secrets. Look where Hermione is running. Like, those two are totally different even between them. And then Diagon Alley in the studio tour has this cobbled street that looks much more similar to the street in the new version. Though the new version seems to have white stones, whereas the studio tour has darker stones. One other thing that I'm noticing is actually, this Diagon Alley set is completely open roofed. Like it looks like it's been built outdoors, right? Not indoors. Not in a giant soundstage or anything. It rains in the UK a lot. I really wonder how they're going to battle against that. Especially when, as you can see next to quality Quidditch supplies, there's a lot of like chipboard and OSB being used in these set builds. It isn't entirely weatherproof. Now if we compare the new Diagon Alley leaks to Jim Kay's illustrations of Diagon Alley, you do see that higgledy-piggledy nature of the buildings really coming to life, right? The way none of them have straight lines. Like Flourish and Blotts bends inwards and then pushes outwards. The way you have doors up here on the 3rd floor in petticaps. Is that pettichaps? Shirts for squirts. I don't remember that from the book. You have like doors that you can go in and out of on the 3rd floor. Not entirely clear how you get to them because there don't seem to be stairs or balconies, but they're there. And that, I know I've said the word higgledy-piggledy more than a person should in like 15 minutes, but it really does feel like they're conveying that quite well with these set builds. Anyway, that's the first look that we have at Diagon Alley. It's not a whole ton to go off, and obviously none of this is finished, so we can only read so much into it, but so far I think it looks quite cool. I think it's interesting to compare the new sets to the old sets because it's going to be a commentary on how much they feel like they can pull away from what they did in the movies. Anyway, let me know in the comments what you think of this Diagon Alley, and if you want to hear what I think about the Dumbledore set leaks, you can click on this video where I talk about that in depth as well.